Hello and welcome. This is Big Talk with Todd and Noah, presented by Xfinity, or should I say it's Big Talk with French Heisenberg and Noah. Todd coming back after wearing an elite hat in France. Before we get started, tell me your Olympic experience. You were over there in
Yeah,
Paris. How amazing was it?
it was incredible. I mean, first of all, I'd never been to Europe, so that was a new experience in and of itself. And then
Europe,
just
period.
nowhere in Europe. And
Wow.
um, we weren't there a long time, but the NBC hospitality was off the chain, just like nothing I've ever seen or been a part of. And then the opportunity to go to some premier events in the evening and then go to some optional leisure activities during the day, a tour of the Palace of Versailles, a day trip to Champagne, a culinary experience, all wrapped into the whole experience there for 6 days. So it was great. The weather was great. I was very impressed just with walking around Paris and just all the cafes and just it was super cool. It was a very, very enjoyable experience.
Well, magical stuff over in Paris, and now we get magical stuff back here on U.S. soil.
Yeah.
We've got week 0 this week, 4 games already on Saturday, which is great. But we're going to go with our 4 downs throughout the season each week here on Big Talk, and hopefully we can recap as much as we can for everybody here. But let's start with first down, kind of entering this season, and a lot of the stuff and the overall vibe will be looked at the Michigan side, looking to repeat
Hmm.
as national champions. They lose 13 players to the NFL draft, which was a program record, but they bring back so much talent, and Sharon Moore has a lot at his disposal. So I think the question is, can they repeat? Can Michigan repeat as national champions? They are top 10 in the preseason AP top 25, and as mentioned, they got a lot of talent.
Yeah, I mean, it's never easy to repeat, right? I mean, so for anybody, I mean, it wasn't easy for Alabama, it wasn't easy for Georgia. It's not easy to do. I would not sell the Wolverines short. Their demise is nowhere near. They've got a lot of talent. They've recruited extremely well, and the biggest thing is they have an outstanding culture that's been in place for the last couple years. And even though there are different faces there, both on the staff and guys will be playing prominent roles in the lineup, that culture is the same. The expectation level, the accountability the players have for each other, that's the same. But it'll be a challenge. You're replacing all 5 offensive line starters from a year ago, and that's been kind of the backbone of the Michigan success these last couple of years. Don't even know yet who's going to be the starting quarterback, heading into this season. A couple guys that are very different in styles and backgrounds and experience. So a lot of question marks, um, but a lot of talent. And again, I think that culture is in place that'll allow them to focus on what they can control, and that is getting better as a football team and as individuals. Because there's going to be a lot of stuff swirling around the program, just like there was all season last year. Still a lot of things going on with the NCAA and allegations and questions, and the players. That's kind of out of their control. So they have to focus on just doing their job. And so I think they're excited to play. They don't have an easy opener by any stretch with Fresno State, who won 9 games last year. They have an early game against Texas, who was in the college football playoff last year. And then just the change in the Big Ten Conference, the schedule is going to be more difficult than what they faced in the last 2 years, and being Big Ten champions. So a lot in front of them, but, they're going to be a formidable opponent, that's for sure.
Yeah, they've got so much talent. It does feel like Alex Orji's kind of pulling ahead in the QB battle, but we'll see with Jack Tuttle if he can utilize his experience and veteran status to kind of pull back closer. It does feel like Orji could be the nice blend with the newer
Yeah.
offensive line with his athleticism and speed and his ability to extend plays. So we'll see what that looks like. Wink Martindale also defensively now instead of Jesse Minter. What does their defense, which was the best in the country, look like heading into this year? But this is why you're a great quarterback, because you bring up second
Yeah.
down right away, and that is the 4 new teams in the
Yeah.
conference and the expanded Big Ten. We look at these 4 West Coast teams, and more than anything, I think great programs always bring great football, and that's really what we have. But I look at it and I say great coaches are always going to bring great storylines and great football. So when you look at USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, what do they bring to the Big Ten this year?
Yeah, well, first of all, with with Oregon, I think you bring a team that's not only capable of competing for the Big Ten championship in their first year, but also a national championship. I think this is a team that has been trending that way. Dan Lanning is one of the best young coaches, has a very young, energetic staff, a team offensively, that lost Bo Nix to the NFL, but they bring in another high profile transfer in Dylan Gabriel. They've got weapons all around him. They'll be able to score, move the football, be exciting. The biggest question for Oregon is, can they play great defense week in and week out? If they can play great defense, they will be capable of making a run at a Big Ten championship and a national championship. And then I think after that, certainly Washington was in the championship game last year, but we've talked about the changes in Michigan's roster and the turnover, even more for Washington. Whole new coaching staff, almost a whole new team. So Michigan's offensive line won the Joe Moore Award 2 years in a row, right? Last year it was Washington's. None of those five starting offensive linemen are back. So you've got a whole changeover in roster. But again, I think Washington will still be a tough out, particularly teams going to Seattle to play for the first time. It's not an easy place to play. It's not an easy trip to make. And so I think that they may take a step back from where they were a year ago, but they will still be very competitive. USC, look, we know they're going to play offense, right? Even though they lose Caleb Williams, Miller Moss is going to step up. They're going to score. They're going to move the ball. They're going to have wideouts. They're going to be flashy. The biggest question again for them, can they play defense? And really, that's been the big bugaboo, I think, for Lincoln Riley when he was at Oklahoma and at USC. Great offense, capable of playing with anybody offensively, but what can they do on defense, And so, new coordinator comes over from UCLA this year, did a great job with the Bruins. And if he can get USC playing at a higher level defensively, they're always going to be a formidable opponent. UCLA is probably the one that's a little bit behind all of them, even though they won 8 games last year. Deshaun Foster, first-time head coach, he was a running back coach there. They lost some key players on that defensive side. As I mentioned, DeAnthony Lynn, their defensive coordinator, gone as well. So it'll be tougher for them. But all 4 programs have rich histories and tradition. They all have great venues for college football. And I just think the addition of those teams, you think about a Wisconsin or a Penn State or an Ohio State fan base, going for a regular season game now to a place like Autzen Stadium or the Coliseum, where maybe you made it there as a Rose Bowl at some point in Pasadena. But other than that, you don't normally make those kind of trips. And the same thing, Washington, Oregon, those teams coming east to play. So I think it's going to be a really fascinating year.
And so I think it's fun for exactly what you just said. And I want to say it was our colleague Nicole Auerbach who made this point that in years past, or really in decades past, all of these ADs, the fan bases were clamoring, give us these non-conference games, give us these exciting non-conference games. You don't have to do that anymore because
Yeah.
now every conference game is going to bring some level of excitement, and every conference game is going to matter that much more when you've got USC against Wisconsin, or Nebraska and UCLA, or Ohio State and Oregon, or
Yeah.
Washington and Michigan. So you've got all of these now built in, baked into the schedule. Makes it more exciting overall as a conference. And we are certainly very much looking forward to some of these matchups in year one. As we head to third down, so this is kind of leading itself into this question. And we talked about some of the teams that we expect to be good in Michigan and Oregon. Obviously, there are others in this conference. So when you look at the Big Ten heading into the season, and I know you're not a big preseason rankings guy, you're not a big
Yeah.
Heisman early guy, you're not a big predict the national championship type guy. But when you look at who can compete at the top of the Big Ten,
Yeah.
just off of the paper, who stands out?
Well, I think you have to start with Ohio State. I mean, the Buckeyes are loaded coming into this year. Now, the only thing I would say is, and they just have to manage this. They have to manage the expectations. I never like when I hear teams say, have the attitude, natty or bust. I just think, there's too much that can happen in a season. Focus on the little things, focus on getting better each day, having a great culture. But certainly from a talent standpoint, both on the field and in the coaching staff, Ohio State is they're going to be the team to beat coming in this year. New quarterback. They just named Will Howard the starting quarterback, transfer from Kansas State. I think everybody kind of expected him to win the job, but it took a while to actually officially do that. Chip Kelly leaves UCLA and is now going to be the play caller. I've always thought he's an outstanding play caller, really understands the run game and the play action game. So I think he and Ryan Day have a unique history and relationship of working together and playing for one another. And so I think that's going to be fascinating to watch. Running back, they went out and got, they already had Travion Henderson. They went out and got Jenkins, from Ole Miss, who was a outstanding running back. So now they have a great 1-2 punch there. Wide receivers they've always had, right? I mean, they just keep bringing them up. Emeka Abuka will be the number one guy, but everybody seems to be talking about Jeremiah Smith, the freshman, who's been there through spring ball, and they think he might be the best they've ever had. And they've had a string of first-round picks, right? But I think the biggest thing about Ohio State is they return most of their defense, okay? Most of their defense is back. It's Jim Knowles' third year of his system, which is not an easy system. I think they will be more complex. I think they'll put more pressure on the quarterback this year. And on top of all the guys they had back, like the two rush ends and one inside guy and the corner, and they also bring in Caleb Downs from Alabama, who was a great freshman last year and is going to be the quarterback of that defense. So I think defensively, it will be one of the best, if not the best, defensive teams in college football if they stay healthy.
I mean, it feels like Ohio State is basically mirroring what Michigan did last year in many respects. They bring back the vast majority of the players that they had. Now, they weren't in the college football playoff like Michigan was 2 years ago prior, but they were right there. I mean, they beat Michigan. Obviously, everything changes. And I do think that part of this season for them, to your point, natty or bust is what you're going to hear. But at the same time, I think as long as they can get back to beating Michigan this year, it's the first step back in the right direction. Like that's where a lot of the problems have lied so far the last couple of years for Ryan Day. Just real quickly to hit, obviously, we already talked about Oregon, and they're ranked number 3 in the preseason poll. They're expected to be outstanding. We know that Michigan's top 10, but Penn State's in the top 10 as well, preseason poll, and they should still be a threat in the Big Ten again.
They should be. There's question marks there, and it'll be interesting to see because they brought in a new coordinator on both sides of the ball, right? So Andy Kotelnicki did a great job at Kansas. Outstanding job. Can he do the same kind of thing with Drew Aller and the Penn State offense? They've got the running backs. I think their offensive line is pretty good. The big question mark for them continues to be the wide receiver position. I don't know what they have or what might emerge as big-time playmakers that can stretch the field. The problem for Penn State last year offensively, they were efficient. They just weren't explosive. So Drew Aller threw 25 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions, but he only averaged 6-something yards per pass. They didn't have the ability to make explosive plays down the field. Now, whether that was play calling, whether it was a quarterback a little hesitant, whether it was a lack of speed or threats on the wide receivers, I think it was a combination of all those things. But you can't beat good teams. You can't beat a Michigan and Ohio State and Ole Miss, a Wisconsin. You can't beat those teams if you don't have explosive plays in your pass game. So that is job number 1 for Penn State offense, is to create more explosive plays in the pass game. They're going to be good on defense. Tom Allen takes over, was a head coach at Indiana, has a really good track record as a defensive coach, comes in and takes the place of Manny Diaz. They've got talent. They've got some of the best players in the league. Abdul Carter will be as good as anybody in the Big Ten now that he's going to be rushing the passer almost exclusively from the edge. But the biggest question is explosive plays on offense. And then in those games that really matter, where it's a toss-up, where the talent is even, how do they play in those games? They have not been able to get over the hump in those games, and that will determine, how far they go. Now, maybe they don't have to win all their games. Maybe they can lose one. Maybe they can even lose 2 and still find their way into the expanded 12-team playoff. But they still have to, at some point, find a way to win those kind of games that are that are toss-ups.
We shall see. It is a big question mark over there for James Franklin and company, and they will have their hands full, but with another loaded roster as expected. And we'll see if Drew can take that step forward and take more of those downfield shots through the season. All right, fourth down. This is as we go deeper into the Big Ten and look down the rest of the table. Are there any teams that you feel like can make an unexpected splash, or maybe not even unexpected, but aren't necessarily looked at as that top tier that can probably compete with some of those teams?
Well, first of all, you have to start with Iowa just because of how good they play on the defensive side of the ball, right? I mean, you know what you're going to get with a Phil Parker defense. I mean,
No
they are
doubt.
going to be solid. They're going to make you earn everything. They've got some All-American caliber players leading that defense. They're smart. They know what they do. So you know what you got with them. The big question continues to be, what will they look like on offense? Can they be more productive? They brought in Tim Lester as the new offensive coordinator. Is Cade McNamara going to be the guy at quarterback? You know, what's going to happen there for sure? But they've got to be better on offense. If they want to compete at a high level, you can't be two-dimensional. You know, you know they're gonna kick the football well, they're gonna play defense, but you got to play offense too. So if they get their offense going, Iowa is a team that I think can definitely make some noise. We mentioned USC earlier. I think because offensively, I think they'll be good. Their biggest question is just the opposite of Iowa. Can they play defense? Can they
Right.
stop
If
some
you put
people?
those two together, it's
Right.
the
Yeah, that'd
perfect
be a heck of
team.
a team, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think Wisconsin will take a step forward this year in Luke Fickell's second year. Tyler Van Dyke is the new quarterback and transferred from Miami. You know, I thought towards the end of the last year, they started to get it going a little bit offensively. I just think they will be a much better team
Yeah.
all the way through this year and capable of making noise. You know, I do think that Nebraska will be better. I don't know if they're capable of competing for the Big Ten championship, but I do think I thought they were going to make a bowl game last year. I kind of predicted it last year, and they kind of let it get away from them at the end. But I do think that they are a team that could win 7 or 8 games this year. You know, a flashy young freshman quarterback, Dominic Raiola, taking over. That'll be interesting to see. Or Dylan, I mean, taking over. You know, the reins there. So a lot of excitement about Matt Rule's team and them taking a step forward in this his second year. I think those are the those are the teams that kind of stand out to me. And I want to mention one other team. And again, I don't know if they're championship caliber, but I think the Rutgers under Greg Schiano has a chance to win maybe 9 games this year. And the reason I say that is because they've got great defense. They have an outstanding running game. You know, they made a switch at quarterback, and we'll see if what is he, the Greek rifle? Is that what he is? Or they we'll see if he can get it
Come
going.
on, Ethan Kaliakmanis, man.
Yes, see, we can see if the rifle can get it going a little bit more in the passing game for Rutgers. But the biggest thing about Rutgers is they don't play. Their schedule is set up for them to win 8 or 9 games this year.
Yeah.
They don't play Ohio State. They don't play Michigan. They don't play Penn State. They don't play Oregon, and they don't play Iowa. I mean, so you would have to say those are the 5 top teams in the Big Ten coming in. Rutgers dodges all of them this year,
Hmm.
just the way their schedule falls. So they have a chance, I think, to have an extremely successful season.
A lot of excitement in Piscataway, not just on the football field, but the basketball court. They've got 2 5-star recruits coming in this year that are expected to be top 5 picks in the NBA draft. So could be a really fun year athletically for Rutgers. I'm glad you mentioned Nebraska. I think that Raiola can be the missing link. I mean, we saw them at the end of the year last year, and their defense was as good as just about anybody in the conference, especially
Yeah, I mean,
towards
their
the end.
big thing is just taking care of the ball, right? I mean,
It
their
was
turnovers
unbelievable,
were their undoing last year. They would have won probably 3 more games had they just
at least.
taken care of the ball. Even if they finished even in the turnover margin in a couple games, they win those games. But
Yeah, they
yep,
probably have 8 wins in year 1 under Matt Rule, and we know what type of culture he can bring, and we've also seen the tape on Raiola, and he looks legit. I mean, it's obviously spring ball, it's a lot of clips, but we'll see what he looks like in the games, but just his pure movement looks pretty impressive. So, will be an exciting year over in Lincoln as we head into our Xfinity Big Connections to wrap up show number 1 of season number 2, and We're going to go back to the four schools that are joining the Big Ten this year, all on the West Coast: USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. They've been connected in a Pacific Conference together since 1928. And you look through kind of what the identity of each team is. USC, they've got 37 Pac-12 championships, 11 claimed national championships. Obviously, you mentioned Washington was in the national championship last year against Michigan. We know USC, it felt like, was starting to have a resurgence with Caleb Williams. Even just 2 years ago, they were on the cusp of getting into the college football playoff themselves. Oregon is right there right now, and UCLA could be building something really from the ground up as they enter the Big Ten now. But we know UCLA, they've got an iconic venue in the Rose Bowl. USC, an iconic venue in the Coliseum. Oregon and Washington, I haven't been to either one. I know that we're
awesome
in all
places.
likelihood. That's what I hear. We're going to go there
They're
this
awesome.
year. And I can't wait. I can't wait to experience what it means to be in that Pacific Northwest college football world, because I've heard nothing but incredible things.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, Noah, the thing that, I've been doing this a long time, and I know I've told you this, the college football, the landscape, everything about it has changed more in the last 2 or 3 years than the previous 30 years that I was involved working in college football. And this year coming up, we may never see another season as unique as this one, because every conference is different. I mean, there used to be Power 5. Now there's only 4, right? There is no more Pac-12. And each one of those 4, not just our conference of the Big Ten with the 4 new teams, they all have new teams, right? The Big 12 added the other teams from the Pac-12 that didn't want to stay. The SEC added Oklahoma and Texas. The ACC added Cal and Stanford and SMU, right? So, I mean, it is the most unusual first year for all these conferences. This is the only year that they'll all be this new. So I think it's going to be really unique to watch this season and some of these new matchups and new games that are going to be quote unquote conference games now.
We saw with Wisconsin last year, as they essentially prepared, they changed their style, or tried to at least get ahead of the curve a little bit and incorporate the spread offense a little bit more. It's a Wisconsin team that, when people think about Wisconsin football, you think about ground and pound defense and running the football. So to see that across the entire now landscape of college football, where programs are going to have to tinker a little bit from what their tradition looks like.
Yeah.
A USC is going to have to really start playing some elite defense if they're going to want to compete in this conference. And the same goes for UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. But it's just an example. So I am excited to see what it looks like overall. And I think we're going to have a great season ahead, Todd.
I think so too. And the other thing that'll be different, in addition to these new teams coming in, you think of, okay, well, if you're Rutgers and you have to go to the West Coast, or if you're Penn State going to play USC, that's such a long trip and getting acclimated and all that. And that's true, right? But you think about some of those West Coast teams coming east in November to play. I mean, you're playing in Madison, Wisconsin in November. You better be able to run the football. You better be able to play some defense, because you never know what the wind's going to be like or the weather's going to be like, whether you can throw the ball the way you normally do. So that'll all be interesting to see. And then the other thing that's new this year for the first time is, as part of that college football expanded playoff, is those first round of playoff games are going to be held on campus sites, which I think is fantastic. I think that if you've played your way into a playoff spot and you're not one of those top 4 that gets the bye, and you deserve to host a game in December, I think that's going to be great. We could see a Michigan hosting a playoff game in Ann Arbor. We could see a Penn State hosting a playoff game in State College in December. I think that's going to be really cool to see.
It is another added element to what is going to be a fantastic college football season. Again, starts this week 0, including the game in Ireland. But we start next week. We'll have a podcast next week leading into our first game, Michigan and Fresno State, to open the Big Ten slate. We'll have previews of all of those games as we get set for Big Ten football this year. We appreciate you for joining us on episode number 1. Big Talk with Todd and Noah, presented by Xfinity. Make sure to download and subscribe on the NBC Sports YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcasts. And again, we will talk to you next week.